Hey, I'm Bay, and you're listening to Bay Baltimore, a weekly pop culture and society podcast recorded. It's not quiet. I'm outside. I'm out and about. I'm in Baltimore, though. This week, because of the work that I do, I got a free viewing ticket, I guess, to see a pre-screening of Disney Plus's The Banker, starring Samuel L. Jackson and Anthony Mackie. And yeah, I saw it and I want to talk about it. But first, clearly I'm outside because I am out recording this on Juneteenth. And so I sent a notification, and I hope you can hear, there's bikes out, everybody's just out. But I sent the link for Dove Coat, and I'm so glad that I did, because while the website, if you go to that website, or at least you Google it, and it says, if you Google it, it says that it was closed. But according to The Sun, and there were 2 article write-ups in The Sun about it, its grand reopening rather, was today, Juneteenth. And so I went there. But let me tell you a little something or other. So obviously on Juneteenth, in majority Black cities and in Black communities across the United States, there are celebrations happening today. Well, because I'm community resources. I work in community resources, always have. Definitely have always worked in community resources since I've been in Baltimore. I just so happen, the resource that I'm sharing these days is mental health. And so I find myself around the meeting table in coalitions and things like that, where there are folks who are sharing other resources other than mental health, right? And so it's like a myriad resources sitting around the table, resources represented sitting around these meeting tables. And they tend to be coalitions. I think I've shared this before, but they tend to be coalitions, collaboratives. Yeah, I'm in a school climate collaborative meeting, which, some of y'all school teachers, I don't mean no harm, but some of y'all are hippy, dippy, baby. I mean, really. And I say that as I'm standing here in is it Tefas or Tefas? I don't know how you say the shoes, but I finally broke down and got some, and these things aren't comfortable. So anyway, I'm going to stop. I'm lying. I'm going to still talk about y'all hippies. But no, these things happen to be very comfortable. I will be wearing the shoes this summer. As I go and trek up and down these roads, these streets. Anyway, so blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I happen to be in one of the coalition meetings that I'm a part of as representing my organization. And there was this mother-daughter duo who came and presented to us because they were putting together a Juneteenth celebration in the Reservoir Hill. And I said this, I think I've shared this before, but the Reservoir Hill area. And so I start, because I'm a connector, I've through my sorority work in the community, and then just my church work, and then just the jobs that I've had, or at least the 2 jobs that I've had before the one I have now, I made community connections. And so when the woman was saying that she and her mother, the ones who are spearheading the effort for a Juneteenth celebration, said that they needed vendors and they needed a city connect. I'm like, well, bet. I happen to have a connect at the mayor's office for basically the arts. Oh shoot, I forgot the title of my connect. But anyway, they're the ones that you go, not necessarily get permits through, but they're the ones that can elevate your event and put it on the city website and stuff like that, and can really throw resources behind it. If the department has money, they can throw resources behind it. So anyway, I shared that information with this young woman. I emailed her. She emailed me back. She said thank you and all of that. And so I was like, okay, bet. I'm supporting a good cause. It's over there in Mount Royal, not Mount Royal, but Reservoir Hill. It's it's going to a good cause. We're trying to get back to something where we're, generating business in the community. I thought there was a connection between Dove Coat. So I was like, okay, bet. Well, why can't we can totally support this? We can totally support this effort. Well, flash forward. So I told my homegirl, who's my road dog since forever. Since I've been in Baltimore, she's been my road dog since forever. Anyway, so of course we were rolling. And so I told her, and she told her sister, one of her older sisters, and her mom. And well, she's the middle, so she only has one older sister, but you get what I mean. Anyway, she told her sister. And so her sister was going to come out because her sister is connected to the community as well. Her mama, though, is really the community plug. If you want to know what's going on in the community, specifically in West Baltimore, like across Baltimore, but for real, West Baltimore and specifically Reservoir Hill, you need to go talk to Mon's mama. And anyway, so Monica, Mon told her mother, told her about this event that I told her about, this mother-daughter duo that was trying to get some more resources out to the community. And of course, Mama Mon comes back and is like, I mean, you could go if you can. I have a few friends who are connected to that as a vendor, but overall, that event is not sponsored by the community association. It's sponsored by people who are outside of the community. They're not from the community, and they're trying to do stuff in the community, and they're not partnering with Dove Coat. And it was so confusing because they're not attached to the community association at all, but they did this little weaselly thing where they used so if the community association, and this is just, and I don't mean no harm, it's just the way it came to me. So if there's beef about this, it's whatever. I'm sharing information, but they did this thing, according to Mon's mom, they did this thing where if the community association was Reservoir Hill Community Association, Inc., they said Reservoir Hill Community. But if you say Reservoir Hill, if you say the neighborhood of the community association, if it's even halfway similar to what other community associations think, you don't think to look for the rest of the name, the association, Inc., it's just like a community association, which is not the same thing as the recognized city community association. But nevertheless, they came across, and it comes across. So they came to our meeting, and again, I thought they were a part of the community association. So it feels like, and certainly from mom's perspective, it kind of feels like they're perpetrating fraud a little bit. But at the same time, I went today. I was just over there. I'm at another place now. But they're right around the corner from Dove Coat's celebration, which was on not Madison. So Dove Coat's was on Madison, and theirs was on Whitelock. If you are not from Baltimore, if you are not embedded in the community, you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, but do yourself a favor, pull up a map. And on that map, go to Madison, look up the streets in Baltimore City, look up the streets Madison and Whitelock. Or look up Dove Coat, because you should be looking up Dove Coat anyway. Because when I tell you Dove Coat is embedded in the community, I mean that in every sense. I just bought a T-shirt from from their vendors, and they were manned by, they call them baby doves, but of course they're teenage boys, so of course they're not going to go by baby dove. They said that they're grown doves, and I'm like, you are not 18. And being 18 doesn't make you grown anyway, but whatever. I'm not going to call you a baby dove because I don't want to disrespect you. You said you a grown dove, so I'm going to call you just a dove, even though you got the baby face, and I really still feel like there's milk behind your ears, but whatever. Anyhow, but I said all that to say, they definitely had people, they're mentoring young kids and teenagers, which is what we need to do. So I'm quite sure they're embedded with the city's Youth Works program. I mean, they're a community-based group. So anyway, so I went and I got their shirt and everything like that. The thing that I really want to say, it's unfortunate that they could not collaborate together. The activities that set them apart is the streets that set them apart are like maybe 2 or 3 blocks set the celebration that was on Whitelock away from the celebration that was on true Madison, like right at Dove Coat, and with all their different vendors. Shout out to all the vendors. They had wonderful vendors. I was on the mission for a Juneteenth bucket hat, y'all. I have yet to find it. If somebody knows somebody that sells Juneteenth bucket hats, don't fool me. And I want them to be, they need to be black owned, so don't fool me. But please leave me a note in the, send me a message with the link, because I will buy it. I just finessed my way into getting a kente cloth bucket hat, like one of those summer weight ones. Because, you know, everybody has seen the winter weight ones, but I want a summer weight one. So I'm about to get that, but I want a Juneteenth bucket hat. I will take it in black. I do not want it in white. I will take it in yellow. I might even wear it if it's green, but my preferred is black. I might even wear it in red if I'm honest, but my preferred is black or yellow. Yeah, so anyway, if you could get your hands on a Juneteenth bucket hat, and I already got the shirt because I didn't have a Juneteenth shirt. I don't know why. Maybe I just can't find, since we moved, I can't find any of my stuff, but I ended up buying the shirt, and now I just need the bucket hat. So if you know of anybody who can sell me a Juneteenth bucket hat, please, thank you so much in advance. Anyway, I hope you were able to celebrate this occasion. If you are Black and American, that was weird. I didn't mean that. What I meant to say is, if you are in the United States, you were able to support a Black-owned business, or if you're not in the United States, and you have an opportunity to support a Black American-owned business, please do so. Yeah, please do so. And at this rate, a Black-owned business, if you're international, if you know it's Black-owned product, throw them a couple bones, because in honor of this glorious occasion. Anyway, but today I am actually talking about a film that I was blessed to actually get a link to see. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not intend on seeing this film. I did not intend on seeing this thing at all, simply because I don't know, I gotta be honest with you, the space that I'm in now, I want to support Black arts, I want to support Black owned businesses and all of that, but it's like I'm not unlike anybody else, any other Black person who, in looking at our history, we recognize that a lot of our stories aren't sunny. They're not sunny. And people love telling scandalous things and negative things and documenting those, but and that gets to be a drain. Like, even though these are true stories, it's still a bit of a drain. You know what I mean? Like, but our history isn't beautiful. There are aspects of it that are beautiful, but there are aspects of it that are very hard. And when I say our history, I'm speaking about Black American history, but I'm also talking about the diaspora as well. There's a lot of beautiful things in our history, a lot of things that we've overcome, a lot of things that we've created, a lot of things that we should celebrate. But for every celebration story, it seems like we have a million of those weird stories that are like, include our oppression, and there's a place for them because it must be documented. We must not forget. But at the same time, it's just like, can be a drain. And I know that the conversation is not, what I'm bringing up is not a new conversation, but nevertheless. And so when I first heard about this, first off, me and Anthony Mackie, I don't know how I feel about him as an actor. I don't know how I feel about him, because I'm gonna be honest with you. When I watched, what was that, Striking Vipers, I enjoyed that film, that short, not because of Anthony Mackie, but because of, what's old girl's name? Oh, shoot. You know who I'm talking about. Anthony Mackie, the woman that played Anthony Mackie's wife. She did a fantastic, wait. It's right there on the tip of my tongue. Nicole Bahari? Is it Nicole Bahari? You know who I'm talking about. Anyway, Striking Vipers, Google it. If you have not seen it, I know I talked about it on this show before, probably when it came out. But it was sorry, I'm saying Striking Vipers. It was the Black Mirror episode Striking Vipers. And it included, was it Yahya? Was it Yahya? Was it Yahya? What's that man's name? Yahya or Yahya? I forgot it. Anyway, I can't remember if it was a standalone. I don't think it was a standalone. I think it was the first episode in Black Mirror. And you know, Black Mirror is freaky anyway. So, but I didn't watch it for Anthony Mackie. I don't know how I feel about him as an actor. I don't know that I've seen enough about him to feel a way. But anyway, so I don't know enough about him to feel any way about it. So when I heard that, when I initially saw, I don't even think I saw a trailer for it. I think I saw a still of the film that included Samuel. It was like one of the stills where it included Samuel L. Samuel L. was standing next to Anthony Mackie, and clearly they were in character, and clearly they were dressed according to the era. And I love Samuel L. Jackson. I grew up on Samuel L. Jackson. I feel like he's a part of my family, and you can't tell me that he's not somehow related. Well, like distantly, we all related, but like, I don't know, I feel like he and my family somehow. Anyhow, but yeah, so I'm like, well, Samuel L. is Samuel L., and he tends to be in movies that I appreciate, although, what's that one, The Bodyguard? Something about The Bodyguard, something with Ryan Reynolds. I hated every bit of that because that seemed like I wasn't the audience for that film series, and I'm still not. And plus, ain't no black women leading in that at all. It barely extra black women who are extras, so you can keep it real hard anyway because of that fact. But anyway, he rarely misses in films for me. But when he do miss. So anyway, so I guess what I was saying is, so I don't really know much about Anthony Mackie, and I'm not really drawn to him. And Samuel L., I love Samuel L., but like, that's not enough to draw me in, you know what I mean? So anyway, and plus it seemed like it was behind a paywall, and I wasn't going to the theaters. If it was going to be released in the theaters, I wasn't going to see it. And if it was going to be behind a paywall that I didn't already subscribe to, I definitely wasn't going to see it. And of course it was. I didn't know at the time when I watched it, but I learned about a month ago that it was a Disney Plus, like Disney Plus had picked it up, and they were going to show it. And I was still like, well, I don't own a Disney Plus subscription, so unless I go over my friend's house to watch it, I'm not finna do that like I've been doing for Loki. But that's because folks are into it. The nobody that I know has been talking about The Banker. Well, I thought nobody that I knew was talking about The Banker, but then I guess all of a sudden, out of the blue, everybody started talking about The Banker that I was engaged with in the last week and a half. It's like out of nowhere there was this big push, and I'm connected. Of course, I've already shared, but one of the major institutions that I'm connected with that's around the community table in a lot of these coalitions is Hopkins. Hopkins has a whole lot of atoning to do. So Hopkins spends a lot of time sending their doctors. They're sprawling. If you truly understood how big Hopkins was, how much of a footprint they have here in Baltimore, you would understand that it's hard for you to be a part of anything community-based, medical-based. It's hard for health-based. It's hard for you to be at the table in any of those community aspects, and there's not. And I'm talking about the big table. I'm not talking about like a small neighborhood table, but let's be for real. If you are a part of a community association and you are in and around Hopkins Hospital, or you are in and around the university, there's going to be a Hopkins representative there. Why? Because Hopkins is big and has a big footprint, casts a wide net across our city. And so anyway, it's long story short, you're hard pressed to be in a big meeting table that you don't see anybody. You're not engaged with anybody who's connected in some shape or fashion to Hopkins, because they're that big. And so anyway, so of course I learned about this in 2 meetings where there were Hopkins people there, and they both kept sharing this link where, oh, come on, we got this link for a free screening you can only do it on one night, and it's only for this window of time. And so I'm like, all right, well, let me go ahead and let me look at the link. Let me see what it's about. Because, I mean, it's stuck in my face and free. And I told you I initially was not going to pay. I wasn't thinking about this thing, number one. And I certainly wasn't going to pay for it, number two. But the link kept being shoved in my face. So I'm like, all right, let me see what this is talking about. So I got the link. I ended up watching it. There's some information in there that, of course, it's a story that I had not heard before, but one that doesn't sound so far-fetched. Like, if you would have told me maybe 15 years ago that two black people would have started a banking system to try to game the system, I would have told you, yeah, that sounds about right, but it sounds like that might have happened, but it couldn't have been big. You ask me now, and in the grand scheme of things, I would say not only, especially what I know about all of the thriving black towns in the country that have existed during Jim Crow, and certainly that are trying to, come back now. I would say absolutely that happened, and it probably happened more than once, but they definitely didn't last long because there was always going to be somebody there to shut it down. And so this story, while it is not something that sounds far-fetched, and it definitely sounds, more than that, it sounds like it's happened time and again, the story itself is kind of incredible how things went down. A little bit incredible how things went down. And again, it's Disney Plus, but more than that, it's a movie. So of course there are aspects of it that are embellished. And it even says as much. This is based on a true story, but necessarily is not totally true in every aspect. But nevertheless, the things that are real in this story are stunning. And so in the next segment, what I want to do is talk about the particulars as best I know them. It hasn't been released yet. By the time I'm recording this, it definitely hasn't been released. And I guess what I will do is, by the time this is released, if more information comes out, I will update this thing. But for now, I will give you what I have by way of particulars. And then what I will do is break down the story in two parts. And the parts are the real estate broker, and then the second part is the banker. The movie is called The Banker, but there is a real estate story that is told first. And it's actually throughout, and I can't believe it was called The Banker and not The Real Estate Agent, but I guess The Banker is a catchier title. But yeah, so I'll break this down into two parts. Because that's really how it went down. And yeah, I'll talk about what I appreciated about the story, about the film. I will talk about what I did not appreciate, give my overall thoughts hopefully without trying to spoil it. And hopefully by the end, I will have encouraged you to change your mind like I would change my mind. And I would pay for this if given the opportunity, because it is an interesting and good, it's a decent film. And so in the next segment, it's all about the particulars and what I thought about the film. So stay tuned. Okay, so to the particulars of The Banker. It was released March 6, 2020, but obviously nobody watched it, or few people watched it. Directed by George Nolfi, who I don't know who that is. Story by David Lewis Smith, Stan Younger, Brad Caleb Kane. Producers Anthony Mackie, Nnamdi Asugma, And I feel like I should know this person. Hold on, let me Google. Namdi Asomuga. This is Namdi Asumuga is Olivia Pope. Who's the woman that played Olivia Pope on Scandal? Kerry Washington. I'm looking at his page. Anyway, Namdi is Kerry Washington's husband. Anyway, yeah, he cute. He should have starred in it. But anyway, so let me go back to what I was doing. So Anthony Mackie, Namdi Asumuga, George Nolfi, again, who the heck is that? And I'm not going to look it up. David Lewis Smith, Brad Feinstein. Like, the only people that I know is Anthony Mackie and Namdi. Yep, that's it. So its DVD release date was June 12th, 2020. But obviously, Apple and their distributor, I don't know if it's Apple TV who picked it. Apple TV picked it up, and of course they're like doing sneak previews and all of that stuff. Because again, very few people saw it last year because it's like it was released March 6th, and then March 13th, Friday, March 13th, if you recall, or at least here in the United States, it was Friday, March 13th. It was the UK, it was Saturday, the 14th for you probably. But yeah, that was the day that all the emails of out of an abundance of care, we're going to cancel XYZ thing and wait for further instructions. And then further instructions just kept being pushed back. So anyway, yeah, so it was like the 6th. Also, March 6th is the anniversary of my chapter's founding. So Saturday, March 6th, I was at a gala, even though probably shouldn't have been at the gala. And I do wonder, because there was like several galas in February. Like my NPHC council, we had a thing in like the end of February, like that's the weekend before. And we were at this space that, if you're in Baltimore, it's called the Garage. You need to host things there. The parking is terrible, but it's in the city. If you downtown, you'll figure it out. Your people will figure it out. There are parking garages like not far, and you'll figure it out. But it is a wonderful space. It's Black owned, and it's a wonderful space to have art shows, to have concerts, to do whatever. Definitely, if you're in the Baltimore area, definitely think about renting the garage space. It's on, I do not know the street that it's on, but if you Google it, it's right off Charles. It's in between Charles and St. Paul. Charles and St. Paul. I don't know the cross street that it's actually on, but it's over there by the Charles Theater and all of that. So anyway, but yeah, we were at the garage the weekend prior, and then we were over at Martin's West for my chapter's anniversary. So we wasn't thinking about nobody's banker. And again, I had heard about it, but not enough to like pique my interest. So anyway, so the releasing of this thing was unfortunate. So obviously Apple TV picked it up. And with a subscription, you will be able to watch it. I think you might be able to watch it now, or you will be able to watch it soon with a subscription from Apple TV. But anyway, we got a sneak peek, we got a sneaky link and watched the film. And like I said, this is why I'm even talking about it in the first place. And so it stars Anthony Mackie as Bernard Garrett, Samuel L. Jackson as Joe Morris, Nicholas Hoult as Matt Steiner. I can't tell you. There's like a bunch of young things that Matt Steiner was in, or Nicholas Hoult was in. Google it. I don't really know. Probably, I think he's a UK actor. Is he from the UK? Yeah. He's from the UK. So like, if you're from the UK and you're listening to this, you know who Nicholas Hoult is, and you know his background, his filmography, TVography, whatever. Anyway, I've seen him in some things, but I cannot. Oh, you know what I remember seeing him in? That was the little boy from that movie with Hugh Grant, whose name I can't remember. But Hugh Grant was the son of a man who was like a one-hit wonder. He had one holiday song and died an alcoholic trying to chase. According to the movie, it was so doggone sad how they did Hugh Grant's daddy in this film, but that he basically set him up to die as an alcoholic trying to chase another number one. And in the meantime, Hugh Grant was basically something like a playboy, a lazy loafer playboy, hitting on women while he's living off the residuals from this one-hit wonder song. And anyway, he runs into Nicholas Holt's character through his mother's friend, who he was trying to impress. And when he met him, he lied and said he had a child. So anyway, and then there's this budding relationship between Nicholas Holt's character and who's picked on and is a musical person. I guess he's musical. I don't really know, but he's picked on and he's weird. And his mom, like, they make fun of his mom's diet because she's vegan, and they make her like the worst vegan ever. And so anyway, can't remember the movie. It's not Almost Famous. You Google it, y'all will figure it out. I'm definitely not looking it up, but I have spent enough time talking about that film. Anyway, so Nia Long, who everybody knows Nia Long, Google her if you don't. She's in everything. She plays Eunice Garrett. Jesse Usher plays Tony Jackson. I feel like I should know who Jesse Usher is. Like, he's cute, and I feel like I've seen him in things before, but not going to look up what he was in. And then Cole Meany plays Patrick Barker. Cole Meany is in 1,000,001 things. 1,000,001. And I'm certain, because of his last name, he identifies as having an Irish heritage background, or Scottish, well, maybe Irish. Anyway, it always feels like every chance he gets, he plays a character that has a really great accent. And I don't know. Hold on, let me look up where he was born. Oh, I'm stupid. So he was born in Ireland, which is why he plays characters that have that accent. Although, how tough is his accent in real life? It's probably just like Delroy Lindo. Like, I'm sure Delroy Lindo, born in the UK, probably lived in the UK too, probably has a very strong UK accent from the region where he lives. So I bet you that Mr. Meany's, Cole Meany's accent, the one that he played, the one that he shares in the shows, is probably an embellishment of his actual accent. And certainly in this film, like, he plays it up for dramatic effect, but nevertheless, it's probably his accent, just a little stronger. Anyway, he plays an Irish person because he is Irish. Look at that. And then Nicole R. Levy, who I don't know who she is, and I don't even remember what her character is in the show, so we're leaving it. Anyway, so the synopsis of this thing is: in the 60s, two entrepreneurs hatch an ingenious business plan to fight for housing integration and equal access to the American dream. Now, again, I told you what I was finna do, right? I told you I was going to split it up into two parts, because the one thing this movie didn't totally convince me on is that their whole mission was about fair housing rights. This movie convinced me that Bernard Garrett and Joe Mortis wanted to be rich. Specifically, this movie made me know for certain that Bernard Garrett and his wife Eunice believed in Bernard's genius and his talent, and that Bernard himself wanted to get everything that he was arrogant enough to think he should own. And I'm saying arrogant not as in Negro know your place, but no, like, he felt if this was an entitled so-and-so. And I don't know if I was supposed to get that from this film, but I definitely got that how Anthony Mackie played this person was not that he was a confident person who just wanted to do right by his community and by his family. No, this guy was self-righteous. Anthony Mackie played him very self-righteous and very smarter than everybody else in the room. And I know I'm smarter than everybody else in the room. And so I'm going to show you. I'm going to make you heel and grovel at my doggone feet how marvelous and how super smart and cunning I am. Right? Like, I'm sure that wasn't the intent of the film, but that's what I got. And I really feel like that's a disservice to the person who actually was Bernard Garrett. But that's what I got. How in the world is Samuel L's Joe Morris more sympathetic to me? This guy who, for the film's purpose, and I'm sure this is an embellishment too, but this dude was a club owner, two-bit hustler, not even a two-bit hustler, just a philanderer, serial non-monogamer, whatever, just like was with a bunch of people, right? With a bunch of women. Sure, he was not super progressive, but nevertheless, he was like a strip club owner, and I can't imagine that the strip club owner is a sympathetic character. Nevertheless, this guy, mind you, if you're owning a strip club, you don't have to be a heel, but like it's ripe for that, especially if you're a man. Anyway, but Samuel L's character portrayal of Joe Morris was more sympathetic to me than Anthony Mackie's Bernard Garrett. And I know that wasn't the intent. Anyway, so what do I mean by this? So the synopsis said that they were all about, setting out to make the playing field fair. No, it wasn't. That's not how it was portrayed in the film. It was portrayed in the film as if Bernard just wanted what he wanted, and he didn't like to hear no. Not that he was revolutionary and trying to do much of anything for his people, although toward the end, when I talk about the second half, the actual banker piece, there is a motivation there for him to do for his community. But even then, it's very self-centered and selfish. Even then, like, let's be for real. Like, they set up a patsy. This whole thing is based on let me just give it to you the way it is. It's an interesting film that you should definitely watch. And while I have quibbles with the portrayal of some of the characters, and not necessarily the acting, but definitely the portrayal of some of the characters and the writing, the story is fascinating. The story is very fascinating, makes you want to look it up. But nevertheless, let's be for real. Two black dudes wanted to game the system and set up a patsy, got them a young white dude as a patsy, and surprise, surprise, they're like the FBI and Congress got involved. Because anytime people find a loophole in the system, especially if it's a quote unquote undesirable group or undesirable people, like two black people, they're going to find all the ways to try to undermine and undercut anything that they've done and try to make it seem as if that the loophole was not just one that they got over on you, but like something nefarious. But nevertheless, like, I appreciate the story. I just hate the portrayal from Anthony Mackie. Gross. I mean, at least, no. And maybe it's not even Anthony Mackie's fault. Maybe it's the writing of Bernard Garrett, and I wish it were better. Anyhow, but the first half is not about being for the community. The first half is all about Bernard owning houses and doing for self and getting money. That's what that is. First half. So, Bernard and Nia are living in California, and I can't recall whether or not they were always, no. It starts out in Texas, and we see Bernard as a child shining white people's shoes, and then eavesdropping on the conversations of these same white people to try to learn from them. Now, mind you, this is, I'm sure aspects of that happened, but it's a little too clean and cookie cutter for me. But nevertheless, we see a young 10, 12-year-old Bernard eavesdropping on the white men whose shoes he's shining to get tips on things. And he has a notebook. He's eavesdropping on them in their business meetings. Particularly, he was shining the shoes of some bankers that he ultimately followed and went to their window of their office, because it was on the ground floor, and began to listen to their conversation and was taking notes, which does not seem far-fetched at all, taking notes and writing down these equations and these phrases and basically becoming a sponge. And what we know is that we have several kids are sponges. kids are sponges, and if allowed to just absorb information, like, who knows what their potential could be. It's if allowed to fully flourish, who knows what their potential could be. But of course, as he's eavesdropping, which is a rookie mistake, because while he is doing something that any smart person would do who doesn't have equal access to the information, he's doing it in broad daylight. And so, of course, there's a police officer outside that catches him. And, of course, what does he say? This is, now, mind you, the height of this film takes place in the 60s. So, obviously, a young Bernard is doing this in the 40s, probably the late 40s, early 50s, which means that there's still very much segregation. There's still very much Jim Crow South. There's still very much this order of the world where black folks are beneath white folks in the social construct. And so there's this black police officer that runs up to a young Bernard, and they say Bernard instead of Bernard. So just, that's why I'm saying it this way, because in the film they say Bernard instead of Bernard. So I'm not being funny on purpose. I'm just pronouncing it the way they pronounced it. Anyhow, so young Bernard is writing. He's, taking notes and all of that stuff. And here comes a black police officer. And he's like, you eavesdropping on them white folks' sale, white folks' business, or something to that effect. And, of course, young Bernard runs off, and he runs to his daddy. At this place, they're in Texas. I forgot to mention, the movie opens in Texas with the young Bernard. Young Bernard, who's been run off by the police officer, who makes seem like a half-hearted attempt to try to catch the young Bernard, runs to his daddy's house and sits with daddy. And daddy's like, "Ooh, you so smart, you so smart." But unfortunately, there's no place for a smart Negro right now to excel. So you're going to have to basically just, young Bernard is like, "Yeah, I got caught eavesdropping, but I want to do with that. I want to be a banker. I want to, achieve high goals." And while young Bernard's daddy is admonishing him, by the way, the actor that plays Bernard's dad is someone known too. Oh, it's Gregory Allen Williams, who's been in a million things. Anyhow, so anyway, while his daddy is admonishing young Bernard for doing what he was doing, he's also saying, "You are so doggone smart," because he's looking at the notebook where Bernard was taking notes, and he's seeing the equations. And it's like, in that moment, and this is well written, this is well portrayed here, I believe. Daddy is like, daggone it. It's like the realization of this, my child is smart. My child is real smart, and yet there is nothing I can do to help him achieve his goals because of where we live. Now, mind you, this is Texas, so we're definitely in the South. We're definitely Jim Crow. Yeah, that's right, yeah, Jim Crow South, where it's the lines and the ceilings are very clear. You can't cross this line. You can't go but so high if you're black. And so, you see the pain over this veteran's actor's face who's playing Bernard's daddy. And it's like, I don't know, that hit me like a ton of bricks in that moment, even though I knew what was coming next in the film. This 2-hour film, by the way, which I don't think it was unnecessarily 2 hours. I'm just noting the fact that it was 2 hours, which is why it's easy to break it up into 2 sections. But anyway, in this first half of that film, even this piece right here, it's like, man, even though you know that that Bernard is going to go on to achieve some stuff, even in this moment, you can appreciate how his father is feeling, that he wants to be able to help his son achieve whatever he wants to achieve, but he just does not have the means, and they're not living in a place where that is even possible, or you can even dream that way. So anyway, of course he's admonished, and you get the sense that life goes on, and Bernard grows, and he still has the ambition, but he does what he's allowed to do. He achieves the academic success he's allowed to achieve, and then he goes on to do the jobs he's allowed to do. And then what we see is he, unless I'm mixing things up, he is with Nia and he's in love and they're married, and I don't know if they're also in Texas or if this is the point where they go up and move. No, they move to California and they're in Los Angeles, and they're living essentially in the attic of Nia's, Bernice, is her name Bernice? His name is Bernard, Eunice. They're essentially living in Eunice's parents' attic, which is not ideal. And there's a dinner that's very humiliating, especially if you consider the massive ego that Bernard has. And then clearly the machismo, it's not even machismo, but I can't think of a less crass way to say this. But definitely the dad expressing his dominance. There it is. Eunice's dad expressing dominance, and also belittling Bernard, because Bernard, again, I've said Bernard is cocky. Bernard is confident. Bernard wants to be able to do what he wants to do. He does not want to lower himself to do other things that would guarantee that his family would at least have some food on their table, that they would have a place to stay, that they would have some comfort. And so that is what Eunice's daddy is essentially getting him on. Eunice, so basically he's like, you need to go ahead and give up these little pipe dreams. You need to go ahead and get you a regular job so that you can support my daughter, essentially is what the argument, his point of view is. And as Bernard is trying to say, I've got a plan and I believe in it, and I'm going to do this, that, and the third. And Eunice is like, well, you need to, I stand behind my husband. And if I got to get a job to support my husband, then that's what I'm going to do, because it's my choice. And I thought that was awful feminist of you. Awful feminist of you. And I'm not sure that that's a real thing that Eunice might have said, but who knows? It just feels a little convenient, but moving on. So what we know is two things. So we know that Eunice is a smart woman herself, but that she also wants to stand and support Bernard because she believes in him and she believes that he'll do great things. And everybody around Bernard knows that he's super smart, but again, they're all living in the same world together, which is that there are certain things, even in Los Angeles, that are not afforded to a black person simply because they're black. Nothing to do with their ability or their desire to achieve, has everything to do with their culture. Anyhow, so there is a point where Bernard says, I'm going to own XYZ place. He wants to, at this moment, he does want to be an owner of an apartment building. Oh, this was what the fight was over with Eunice's daddy. He wants to be an owner of an apartment building that he will buy and flip to rent, thereby giving him and Eunice a place to stay, but then also generating income from their building. But he has no money and he doesn't have a steady job. And so that's what Eunice's father was breaking his back over, basically. And then Eunice said, well, I'm going to support him in every way possible because I believe in his vision. Anyway, so clearly the father does not. And so in trying to figure out how in the world that Bernard is going to achieve this goal of buying this building to become essentially a landlord, Eunice says, well, I do have a friend who owns their own businesses owns their own business and owns their own property, who could help lend you the money to get the loan to buy the house, because that was the thing. He needed to have money he needed to be able to get loaned some money. And in order to get a loan of the magnitude that he needed to buy the property, he needed to have some collateral, basically. And he didn't have any. So he needed to have somebody else go in and get him a little something. And so Eunice initially tries to get him to connect with, this is how Bernard meets Joe, Samuel L's character. And so their first meeting is in Joe's club. Joe's got something like a 1960s strip club, something like that, I guess. And anyway, Bernard has his nose up in the air, because Joe and his ilk are beneath Bernard. And again, it's not endearing. I don't find myself drawn to Bernard as a character in this film. He's a jerk. He's a jerk, and he's self-important and just not a likable character. And again, I don't know if that was the intent of this film, that we should not like Bernard, but I don't like Bernard. I barely even like Eunice, and I think I can't put my finger on why, but I barely like Eunice. The only character that I actually like is Joe Morris, because at the very least, he's not putting on airs. He's totally relaxed, understanding that he be game in the system. And throughout the whole film, that he essentially says, do I even like this film? I said I like this film, but I'm starting to think that I don't. Anyway, let me keep going. Because, really, throughout this whole daggone thing, there's just more irky things that happens in this film. The one character I actually like is Joe Morris. And it's not because of who he is, but it's about how he carries himself. He's a businessman that knows the game and tries to play the game and tries to game the game as much as possible, but he knows the game, right? I just don't like Bernard and Eunice, because they just seem not even Eunice. It's just I think I don't like Nia Long's acting as Eunice. I think that's the issue. I think Anthony Mackie's acting as Bernard is fine enough. I just don't like the character, and I'm not sure that he does it too much justice. Anyway, let me keep going. So, was not expecting that. I really thought I was going to lie. Anyway, moving on. So, Joe and Bernard's first meeting is a bust, largely because Bernard's got a stick up his behind. He's trifling. Or he's trifling towards Joe because he thinks he's better than Joe, and Joe is beneath him somehow, because he is a strip club owner, basically, and he's a philanderer. Which, yes, those are you being a strip club owner don't do nothing, that ain't got nothing to do with you, other than you are playing those respectability politics. Him being a philanderer is abhorrent. But in the concept of business, what do that got to do with business? Nothing, especially when you're trying to get a loan to do this thing that you said you wanted to do. You wanted to achieve your goal. But of course, he got up and left. So that was the end of that first initial meeting. It was terrible. So we are then taken on a journey where Bernard meets up with Patrick Barker, the Irish guy I was talking about before. So anyway, he initially meets with Patrick Barker to try to get a loan with him, and it initially doesn't work out. But long story short, without belaboring the point, Barker takes a chance on Bernard, and I don't know that it's exactly as clean as they are describing it in this film. Feels like Barker knows a good deal when he's about to see one, and he knows a good hustle when he sees one, right? Because because of what ends up happening later. So let me just say this. So toward the middle to the end of the second half, long story short, Bernard convinces Mr. Barker, what's Barker's name? Patrick convinces Patrick to loan him money because of his tenacity, I guess, but then also because Patrick sees dollar signs in Bernard. Let's be for real. So anyway, they buy a house, they flip it just like Bernard said he was going to do all those years ago, and they start making money. But not only that, Patrick recognizes that Bernard has a better eye for how to spot property that can make money, even though it's run down in the long run. And so what do Patrick and Bernard do but enter into a contract where, once again, for the very first time in Bernard's life, he uses a white man as a front man, as not a patsy. In this context, it's a front man. But they're a partnership. They're a partnership in all but name. Bernard is not on a single contract for any of the houses that they buy. Bernard is not listed anywhere as not even being an associate of Patrick. So, and obviously that comes back to be a problem because they're buying up these houses. Nobody could do nothing about it. They're making money hand over fist. And then Bernard is about to come into some serious money, but then surprise, surprise, something happens. The shoes drop, and what should happen but Patrick dies in his sleep. And when Patrick dies in his sleep, so too does the relationship, the business relationship that they had, whereby Bernard owned 50% of all the properties that they had purchased because that was the initial deal. And no surprise here, in the will reading, or I guess when Bernard was trying to get his money from his widow, of course, Patrick's widow was a raging racist and said, you gonna get, instead of 50, you gonna get like 20% of what you were owed. Instead of that 50% on the dollar, you getting like 20. And that is, you better be happy about it. And so, of course, Bernard is furious and all of that stuff. So, and he's trying to get a loan from this white bank, and he's not able to do it. And he's furious about it because they won't see him because he's white, or because they're white and he's black. And so the end of the first half of this film, Bernard is less rich than he thought he was going to be, and now his ego is even more inflated because he's angry that how dare this not go the way it should go for me, so I'm gonna get y'all. And so the first half of the film ends with him hatching a scheme to buy the bank that had been denying him loans to buy buildings this whole time, to be a landlord, basically. And so the second half, so the first half of this film should be called The Realtor, because it was all about buying real estate and flipping it and becoming a landlord. The second half of this film is actually the banker part. And so in the next segment, I'll walk through that whole piece there as best I can, talk about the ups and the downs too, and then I'll finish it off by talking about my overall thoughts about the film and the actual story of the banker. Okay, so second half is actually the banker. Holier than thou. It's not even holier than thou. He's got, Bernard's got like a stick in his crawl, and he's like, okay, bet, we finna take the bank. And so he goes back to Joe and is like, and let me just hold here for a second if I haven't already said it. So again, I think I did say this, that even in this whole housing venture that Bernard had, Joe was along for the ride because he understood the vision and how it could pay off, but he also understood the risk. But what outweighed everything was what he knew to be true, which was the same Patrick. My bad. So the same thing that Patrick saw is the same thing that Joe saw first in Bernard, which is Bernard's total desire to dominate. Read his delusions of self-grandeur that actually were made real, right? Like he's the one time, he's like one of those CEOs that like really beat and clawed and scratched his way to the top, stepping over people in the process, but like come to life, right? So like he caused the least harm, but nevertheless, well, I guess me in this 22nd century, are we in the 22nd century? Anyway, me in my modern day lens looking at Bernard, that man is cutthroat, right? But back in those days, it was still cutthroat, but it was seen to be from Joe's perspective as empowering, from Patrick's perspective as this man is a moneymaker, he's hungry, and I can mess with that, right? And so Bernard in today's culture would be a part of the Rise and Grind crew, right? He would be the LLC part of Twitter, right? He'd be the lift yourself off your bootstraps part of Twitter, right? Not discounting all the ways that all of those sentiments are flawed completely, but he would definitely he'd be like the poster child for Rise and Grind culture, LLC Twitter, right? Not to say that in going after world domination, he didn't, in the end, create opportunities for people who might not otherwise get them. In the case of the housing piece, he was renting to black folks. He was renting to black folks in this neighborhood that was nicer than the ones they were in because he knew black folks wanted nicer neighborhoods. And so that's what he did. Now, lined his pockets completely and also grew his ego, but there was some good in that too, right? But then the walls came tumbling down when Patrick died and his hateful wife decided to stiff him on a considerable portion of his rightfully earned wealth, right? So Bernard turns that energy and says, okay, bet. Well, now so I can't do you. Let me go to these banks and try to get some money to do something else. Well, the problem had always been that because he was black, these white owned banks and these white bank tellers were not seeing him. These white loan officers were not seeing anything he had to say, hearing anything he had to say. So Bernard, completely heartbroken, deflated, turns and goes to, not deflated, heartbroken and angry, turns to Joe and says, well, now I want the bank. I want the bank that gave us the loan to begin with. Because I think what I did omit in the first part was that Bernard had gone to this one particular bank, the something Bank of Los Angeles, just call it Joe Blow Bank of Los Angeles, biggest game in town, initially to get a loan to buy that housing complex that he initially wanted. But instead, he ends up going to Patrick, and Patrick gives him 20 grand, and they end up getting the loan together because Patrick, the white man, who can put up the collateral, co-signs for the loan, and that's how they're able to begin flipping houses. Well, so again, Bernard knows that he can't go back to that same bank to get a loan to continue doing other things because the bank won't allow it, because it's him, because he's black. So Bernard goes to Joe and is like, bet. So let's put some more of your money in and let's go buy this bank right quick. Let's put some ones with some twos, get some other outside people, and let's get this money. And so that's what he proceeds to do. Again, the only reason, and this is important to know, and it just wasn't, in my opinion, very well highlighted in the film. The only reason why Bernard was able to do anything that he was able to do wasn't simply because of his grit, wasn't simply because he was super smart and he was cocky enough to do it. He needed the backing of somebody who had the money. Joe had the money. Patrick had the money. And Joe and Patrick had the connections. And when Patrick died, Bernard leaned on Joe's connections, which he did have. Joe was bad. Like, this movie, I appreciate Bernard, and it's very clear that the movie wanted to focus on Bernard, but we should have spent a little bit more time on Joe as well. Joe was a club owner back in the 40s and 50s when it wasn't cool for you to be black and being a home owner, a club owner, especially, and at that time was predominantly white Los Angeles. Like, it just wasn't. Joe was doing some hardcore stuff, and then Bernard needed Joe in order to achieve his dreams. I certainly won't take away from Bernard's will and desire to dominate and conquer and grab a piece where a black man hadn't been able to grab a piece before, of the pie before. But let's be for real. Can we give Joe his flowers? Joe was not the poster child here. It's clear that they wanted you to have all eyes on Bernard. But I'm sitting up here looking at Joe and like, Joe is somebody. That's a bad man, right? Owning all of this stuff and slick enough to be able to find capital where he doesn't have it, to be able to ride the coattails. Because that's essential. I mean, Joe was doing some work now. Joe was doing some work, but like he was using Bernard, simply same as Bernard was using Joe, to get what he wanted. But like, Joe was there first, is I guess what I'm saying. Like, you can't knock Joe's hustle, because he had been doing what Bernard was doing since before that. And there's a moment in the film, in the second half of the film, where, no, was it the first half of the film, where Bernard acknowledges that Joe been that man for quite some time. But, you know, like, there's an acknowledgement there, and I think it's an acknowledgement so that he could ultimately play to his ego and then ultimately get his way. But nevertheless, there's an acknowledgement here because it's true. So anyway, but the thing that I'm frustrated at Joe about was like, Joe, you've been playing your role. You've been getting these white people's money. You've been getting money, period. You've been living in this predominantly white society, earning and owning and acquiring for a minute now. Don't mess up your good thing because you got a good formula going. Well, too bad. Here comes Bernard, and Bernard with this idea, we finna buy a bank. And Joe was like, nah, this is a bad idea. But all right, I go with you because, you know, I thought the other thing was a bad idea too, and it worked out. Bernard should have followed his first mind because the thing about it is the buying of the houses wasn't the problem. It was always going to be, you were never on paper, boo. Like a handshake and a smile. A handshake and a smile only works for people who are working on the even playing field. The minute Patrick passed away, they had no leg to stand. Bernard had no leg to stand on. He could only take the scraps that Patrick's widow could give him. And so Joe wasn't wrong to be skeptical of that setup because it was flawed from the jump, right? And see what happened. And so he doesn't trust his instincts again totally when he goes gung-ho after this bank thing. And so we know you can Google how it ended. But let's talk about how we got there, though. The movie, everybody can Google the ending, but how you get there is really where the story is. So let's tell you, the second half of the story is the thing that beyond Bernard's ego, we move beyond Bernard's ego. I'm not even studying his ego at this point in the second half of the film. I'm really frustrated because of the sequence of events that you know were gonna happen and how they happened, regardless of the outcome. And we'll get to the outcome in a minute. But long story short, so back before Bernard's housing bubble burst, he brought in his cousin, Tony. He brought in his cousin, Tony Jackson, to help him flip houses, basically, because a part of them flipping houses, him and Patrick were minimizing the overhead costs by going in and doing what they could by themselves. Certainly, Bernard was skilled enough that he was trying to get to do the work that he could get done, right? And so he brings in, I believe, Tony Jackson, played by Jesse Usher, is something like something like that. Anyway, and so Tony had been working on like some sort of meal or what have you, and that's where Bernard picks him up. And while he picks up Tony, he also picks up his friend Matt Steiner, played by Nicholas Hoult, this working class white guy, white young man, looked to be the same age as Tony Jackson. So in the second half of this thing, Bernard and Joe recognize that just like with the realtor piece, we need a front man at all times. We're not gonna make it. We still living in a time where black people can't own too much of nothing, especially own nothing. Nathan Nathaniel III in a white community. So they need a front man, same as with the housing piece, right? They need them a Patrick. And so they're like, okay, well, bet. We don't actually need me a Patrick in that he needs to be intelligent and need to like know everything. We just need somebody that can sell an image, can do enough to get by. And so it is here that they hatch the scheme that, oh, well, we know we need us a little patsy. We need something, not a patsy, because a patsy implies that they don't know that they're in on the con. Matt Steiner was definitely in on the con. So they approach Matt Steiner. Joe and Bernard approach Matt Steiner and like, okay, yo, you finna be our front man for this bank. Oh, excuse me. So, and you know, I done dropped my doggone device. Hope you can hear me. Anyway, so they go and they work with Bernard and hilarity ensues because blah, blah, blah. There's a whole 20-minute period where they're trying to make him the most proper uppity white man that they can, that has all the, trappings of somebody who's grown up rich, or at the very least was educated well and had some money and came into some money and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so they go back and forth and do all of that. And then surprise, surprise, at the end of the montage and at the end of the scenes, of course, they've got Matt Steiner to be the white man that they need him to be. So goes the scheme to try to take over the world by, at the very least, taking over. I think the bank was called the Bank of Los Angeles, the biggest game in town. And so blah, blah, blah. They end up with Matt as their front man, Joe and Bernard as the silent partners. They buy the Bank of Los Angeles and they're living high on the hog. And so now, not only do they own all of the tellers, not the tellers, but the loan officers who had rejected Bernard before, now they work for him. They work for him now. And not only that, but now he can tell the bank through Matt to give certain people loans, certain people, in this case, like black folks, loans that they would not have been able to get otherwise. Now, mind you, respectability politics being exactly what they were. And for the time, respectability politics had their place. And so in this concept, only black folks with really good credit histories and stable working backgrounds and all of that stuff were able to qualify. That way, that if they ever found out that the loan applicant, receiver, whatever, actually, if they ever found out there was a black person, what they couldn't say is that they couldn't pay. What they couldn't say is that they weren't deserving based on their credit history. The only thing that they essentially eliminated all the opportunities that would preclude them from being certified for these loans by any other reason other than it was a racial thing, right? So again, I understand completely. Up until this point, I totally understand why they were talking about this as a fair housing sort of situation. It feels like a shoehorn. It seems like it's more about accessibility to the same resources. It seems like a rights thing, but whatever. Like, you go about certain situations based on the legal footholding you can grasp. So anyway, so they own the Bank of Los Angeles. Nobody knows they own the Bank of Los Angeles except them, their families, and Joe, or Matt and his people. And so something happens, and for the life of me, I cannot remember now, and I don't have the link again, then I can watch it to remember. But something happens to where, it's not a something happens. It's not a something happens. Bernard gets a stick up his crawl again and decides, again, Bernard is coming from Texas. And in Texas, you couldn't achieve much. And in Texas, not that they were achieving like a bunch, like they were just doing it up openly in Los Angeles. It's not like that, but they were still able to achieve more in Los Angeles than they were ever able to achieve when Bernard and Eunice were in Texas. So Bernard gets the idea that he wants to go back and help his hometown and help the people living in his hometown and make his daddy even more proud, right? At this point, he's sending money home, like they're doing good, they own houses and blah to the blue, 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 right? So they buy a bank in this small town. And from the very beginning, the deal seemed doomed because while it was like a father-son sort of owned bank, while the father was in on it and definitely wanted to set his tail down and get this money without having to do very much, the son very much wanted to take over ownership of the bank. And so in true hater fashion, the son goes out, and while the bank successfully changes hands to Bernard and Joe being the silent partners and Matt being the front man, the son of the guy that they just bought the bank from begins to, in true hater fashion, make life difficult. So they do the same practices they did at the Bank of Los Angeles, where they begin to offer loans to eligible black people, who by any other reason, except for the color of their skin, would have always qualified for these loans. So they begin to do that, and then unfortunately, they begin to do it so quickly that, again, Hate No, son of the previous owner, who's still working at the bank, begins to dig in, and then he starts to ask questions. And then lo and behold, before you freaking know it, he shows up at Matt's house. And who should he find at Matt's house but Bernard and Joe? And he's like, okay, well, bet. Now, I'm not the only one who could figure this out. Other people, this is a small town, a small white town in Texas, so other people can figure this stuff out too. So, of course, you know what happens. So because of, or not, and definitely not in spite of, Hate No white guy that wanted to own the place, people begin to find out. Or at least there are rumors going about. And so all the white folks in that town that had money at that bank began to withdraw their money. And so suspicion was raised. And then, so if that wasn't enough, then the banking industry or banking regulators want to do a spot check, something like a spot check or an inventory. It's not inventory. What is it? An audit. They want to do an audit of the bank because there was a complaint about their banking practices. And so, it's hot right now for them, and Bernard and Joe have found out, and Hate No, son of the previous bank owner, is feeling away and all of that stuff. And this is the thing, this is the dumb thing that racist white people don't understand. In tanking the bank, he also tanked his own job prospects. Dummy. You lost racist white people, they will literally burn down the only restaurant in their town because it is owned by somebody who isn't white, right? This has happened before, especially in the United States. I cannot speak to the racist white tendencies of folks globally, but it feels like that would be right around the line of what they would do, right? Sidebar, I was watching Exterminate All the Brutes on HBO, and I don't know why I've never seen that. But I saw in broad daylight in a recording from a guy who was, I think he was Polish, or was he Swedish? Anyway, he was in one of those I don't know that Poland is a Nordic country, but one of those Nordic countries in Europe. And he said with a straight face, he was clean cut, had a nice little suit on, had a little haircut, talking about, we don't want to mix with those dirty Czechs. Basically, it was a European country that has gypsies, people who have a racial background. And I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to you guys from the UK, because you guys have a better understanding of that, and you could probably send me a message to help hit me to what I should be saying. But for all of my people listening from the United States, there are a lot of European countries that have gypsy populations there, and the gypsy population has a lot of different ethnicities, but they also have Indian background and from India, and they have Pakistani and Middle Eastern background. There's a Romani, the Romani people who have Spanish heritage and Indian heritage, and I think there's another community. I think it's Pakistani. Anyway, so I think it was either in Poland or was it the Netherlands? But anyway, this racist white person essentially sounded just take the accent away. He said something like, get these dirty either get these dirty polls, or he said the country. He didn't say the culture of people. He literally said he identified them by their country. And so anyway, like, he had an accent, and I'm like, but for the accent, like, that could just be some D-bag in the South saying that same stupid stuff. So anyway, I imagine that racism across the globe is not too terribly different. But anyway, in this context, like, it just never ceases to amaze me the lengths that racist white people will go to destroy someone that they consider to be less than them, even if it means taking their own resources away too. Dummies. Ooh, that's so just the dumbest thing you could ever do. Anyway, moving forward. So anyway, the son of the former head of the bank does everything possible to raise suspicion, and then of course there's an investigation that is going to be launched. Only they're given time. They were given 30 days ahead of time to be prepared for the audit, and they were going to be ready. They were going to make sure that Matt was prepared. And in the middle of all this, Matt and his, I guess, new wife or new girlfriend decide that Matt needs to own something of their own. He's been a front man for Bernard and Joe for long enough. His wife pushes him to own their own bank. So despite their better judgment, definitely Joe was not on board with this, and Bernard even said, nah. They open another bank. They take over another bank and open it, and of course, that thing doesn't last long. They take it over, and before you know it, the audit that was supposed to happen at the first bank that they took over in Texas, it actually happens at the second bank that they took over, the one that Matt was supposed to control completely. Because he wanted a piece of the pie now, because he was tired of working for the black man. Anyway, because that's kind of how it came across in the movie. Anyhow, so only it wasn't as well regulated as the first Texas bank was, as the Bank of Los Angeles was. So he allowed loans in the audit. The auditor was able to identify some loans that should not have been, because quite frankly, he just kind of Matt let things slip. And his zeal to conquer and take things over and to be a bumbling idiot because white man can fail up. He's like, oh, well, I didn't really look that hard. And so surprise, the whole freaking empire is in jeopardy. And now they seeking federal charges. They up against federal charges. Let me pause right here, because the one thing that I didn't tell you is, while Matt was a good patsy candidate, not a good patsy candidate, but a good front man, because he was a great actor and he was already connected somehow to Bernard through Bernard's cousin. What we learned when we first meet Matt is that he used to own an ice cream parlor, but the ice cream parlor failed. Now, can we just sit in that for a second? How bad do you have to mess up your business to have an ice cream shop in the 50s fail? We needed to talk. I wanted more about that. Why did it fail? Was it because you were bad at the books? Was it because that it wasn't situated appropriately? You didn't have the best flavors? Like, what was it? What was it that made you a failed businessman? Because before going into bed with them, they probably needed to know that, because by the time we get back to here, I think I have an understanding of why his ice cream parlor in the 50s failed. And I'm saying it like that because in the 50s and 60s, you know what they didn't have a lot of? They didn't have a lot of entertainment. They had movies and they had TV. They only had a couple of channels back then, right? So if you wanted to be entertained, there was definitely other things that you could do. And one of the things that, especially in the United States, can't call how folks celebrated and hung out, teenagers specifically celebrated and hung out across the globe in the 50s and 60s. But what we know about American history is that the automobile and the prevalence of the automobile in teens was a huge thing. And teen accidents really began to be really big there, because teen accidents came on the rise because teens had more autonomy and their parents had more access to wealth, or were beginning to have access to wealth, or more people were. And so they were getting cars and they were going out and they were drinking their soda pops and they were having their ice cream and they were doing whatever they wanted to do, because they didn't have to work in them daggone factories no more. There's a whole other conversation about teenagers and when the advent of teenager and when that came about. But in the 50s, teenagers were like being able to be teens finally, right? And children and just do young stuff. And one of the things that they did was went to ice cream parlors, went to little dances, went to little clubs, went out to the little soda restaurants or what, I don't even know what they call it, hot dog stands or whatever. They went out and they hung out, is my point. And so how you gonna have a ice cream parlor in Los Angeles fail unless you're a bad businessman? And so they didn't take a lesson from him. That the minute that he asked, the thing about it was they couldn't tell him no because he was their front man. And if the minute he walked away, their whole empire was through. So how manipulative was Matt? I really don't like this film. How manipulative was Matt? They're going to sit up here and play like this is all Jake. Like he was just, he really wanted to be, one of the good whites. Whatever. Like, shut up. He was trash too. They was all, let's be for real. Can we just be for real for a moment? There are flaws with all three of these characters. This is not a feel-good movie to me. This is a I'm trying to get over film, and in the process, some black people were helped film. But let's not paint this with let's take these glasses off. Because the more that I think about it, you got a failed businessman as your front man, and then the failed businessman wanted to hustle so hard, he turned around and hustled you at your own hustle. And then messed up because why? He could fail and be okay. You can't, dummies. Anyway, so and again, I have the gall to be able to respond this way with this century modern day lens, having not understood what it was like to live and to want to achieve in a time frame where it was nearly next to impossible for me to do so, right? So I got a whole lot of nerve saying anything, and I gotta say, I guess I'm just more mad at the portrayal in this film. This is a Disney film by any other phrase. Like for real. It's coming across very Disney, but there's nothing Disney about the way that these men moved. Right? This was con after con after con. And I don't care if it was a con for a good purpose. You were still conning. And the basis of your con was so that you can self-grandeur. Let's be for real. And self-enrichment. Come on now. So anyway, of course, like it goes to hell in a handbasket quickly, right? And they're found out by the audit happens at the third bank that they own as a group. And then they head to Washington, head to Senate hearings. Now the movie opens up actually with Bernard sitting down, about ready to give testimony in front of a Senate hearing, right? And then it goes into the backstory, right? So by the time we get past down to this second half, at the end of the second half, we find out why Bernard is speaking in front of Congress and the Senate panel. It's because there's a particular senator whose name I have forgotten and I don't care to look up, wanted to use Bernard as an example of how they need to improve regulating practices, financial practices, loaning practices, lending practices in the banking industry, because Bernard was able to, in his mind, perpetrate a fraud. This senator's mind, perpetrate a fraud. In Bernard's mind, he was like, I game the system because the system is rigged to begin with, and I'm trying to make a path. Like, you wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do naturally, so I had to game you, right? That was his perspective. Only he wanted to color it up and say, or dress it up and say, you deny black people just because they're black and stuff like that. But let's be for real. He really did it because he was denied. Not that black people were denied, but that Bernard was denied initially. So anyway, there's this push and pull where the senator just wants him. He said, listen, y'all finna go free. Y'all finna go free. You and Joe, y'all finna go free. I just need you to help me prove that these regulations, these loopholes in the banking industry need to be closed up. And Bernard was like, no, I want to talk about the fact that, y'all are discriminating. And the senator's like, nah. And let me put a further point on this. If you talk about that other thing, I will make sure you were thrown up under the jail. Right? But if you talk about the thing that I want you to talk about, you'll be good. You'll be good. So, of course, in this showdown, and again, in this portrayal, this movie portrayal, and I want to be clear, the movie is probably vastly different than what actually happened. But in this movie portrayal, A couple of things happened. So what we know for a fact is Matt was turned against Bernard and Joe. Turned against Bernard and Joe, and made to seem like he was coerced into being the front man. Made it seem like he was truly a patsy. He didn't know what the heck they were doing, and that he only did what they wanted him to do. He had no idea the consequences of his actions. And he could say that in that time frame as a white man because the law was on his side. The society was on his side. And so, yeah, he got up there and lied through his teeth, and they believed him. Bernard gets up there, and instead of saving his own skin, he decides that he wants to make a stand against and rally against racial discrimination practices, especially in the banking and the homeowning industry. And of course, the senator made good on his promise. So not only did Matt walk away untouched, but Bernard and Joe got thrown up under the jail. All their assets were seized. All their homes, all their money was snatched by the U.S. federal government. And that sounded so country just now. The U.S. federal government. And anyway, they did federal time. As they say over here in Maryland, federal time. They did federal time. And so, yeah, that felt like the end of the film, but oh wait, there's more. So I think they did as what I've also learned, they did a bid. They did like a 5-year bid, 5 or 7 year bid. It wasn't like a year. They did more than that. And anyway, so they come out of prison. They come out of prison. And Bernard thinks he's broke as a joke. No, not Bernard. Eunice comes and gets him, and she's with Joe. And think they're broke as a joke. Come to find out that before the night of the hearing where Bernard was gonna give them the what for, Matt called Bernard and Joe and was like, yo, I feel awful about all of this stuff, and so how can we listen? It was either me go to jail for 50 years or tell on you. So I'm not going to jail, so I'm finna tell on you. And I guess they had an agreement to each other, and they were like, yeah, I see your point, blah, blah, blah. And so what ended up happening was, before the bank seized all of the assets of Joe and Bernard, at least the gains that they got from these ventures, Matt got a bunch of it and put it in the Cayman Islands and bought a house for the both of them. Not Cayman, but in one of them islands. Snatched a bunch of money, bought houses for them in the islands, so that when they got out of prison, they would be able to just go there with their families. The end. And then there's a montage at the end of the film that shows the real Bernard, the real Joe, and the real Matt, and the real Eunice. And there is a picture where Bernard and Joe meet the president at the time. I think it was, don't give me the line, one of the presidents at the time. Eisenhower? No, it wasn't Eisenhower. Can't call it. Anyway, and so that's the end of the film. And at the end of the film, what they say is, because of Bernard's testimony, that paved the way for Fair Housing Act to go through Congress and then be passed, so that they would end lending discrimination against Black folks and housing ownership Black folks anywhere, or just generally not just Black folks, but end discrimination for any reason in the housing and lending business. Now, we know that we still had over the decades many issues with lending, discriminatory lending practices and predatory lending practices too, which is another form of discrimination. But this movie makes it seem like it was because of the actions and the testimony of Bernard in Congress that we had the way was paved for fair housing. I'm sure that's a lot of that is true. I'm sure that's not the only reason why the way was paved, because it never truly is just a one thing. It's not a single act ever that blazes a trail. It's several different people doing several different acts that blaze that trail. But yeah, overall, I understand what they wanted to do with this film. I really do. They wanted it to be a feel-good story about some people who were conning, like a feel-good con story, but they were doing it for the right reasons. They were doing it for us. But in reality, this was a con movie about some hustlers, 3 hustlers who hustled each other and then ended up hustling the government. The end. That's the film. I don't know why they went out these links. Like, come on, like y'all could have did a little bit better than what you had done, but I'm sure somebody's going to love this film. And I know I told you to watch it, and you should, but just know that like it's kind of irky. And maybe I'm just being persnickety about that. But if you're anything like me, then maybe I saved you a watch. But I'm glad that I got the link. I'm glad that I got to see it for Samuel L's performance. Samuel L. played the heck out of his role. But for nothing else, I'm not pleased. I don't love Nia's role in this. It was sidelined, to say the very least, and wasn't very good. Anthony Mackie, I'm not in love with Bernard. And I don't think it had anything to do with Anthony Mackie's acting. I think it had everything to do with the writing and the poor characterization. There were some shining moments in this. Now this is a story I didn't know. This is a story that I would not have known to look up had I not been introduced to this film. So that's the only reason why I'm talking about this thing, is because it's a really good story. And if anything, I would like to see a documentary about this and learn more about Bernard, learn more about Joe, learn more about Matt, even, especially how his business failed. Learn more about the why that thing failed. It's not as cookie cutter as there was a hating guy at a hating old person at the First Texas Bank that got them in trouble. I feel like I want more backstory than that. I also want to know more real time. If for real, I want to know what happened leading up to the court case. I want to know more about them after the fact too. For real, did y'all have some houses out in the islands? After you got out, after you did several years, who kept up your houses? Did Eunice truly not know? Again, I think a lot of this is played up for drama, but I would rather watch a documentary about this than this film, because this film did not do the story justice. And the most interesting character was Joe. Samuel L's Joe. I keep saying Joe, but Joe Morris. Samuel L's Joe Morris. I want to know more about Joe Morris. That's it. Anyway, in the time that I've recorded this episode, I've actually taken breaks and watched a lot of media. I will tell you this, leading up to my birthday, by the time you're reading this, my birthday is this Sunday. I'm going to have a ball, right? But after that, I celebrate all summer, let's be for real. So I got people that are doing things for me leading up to the weekend, over the weekend, and then after the weekend. And after the weekend, on the 30th, guess what I'm watching? Zola with my homegirl Mine. It's going to be exciting. Hold on, let me just verify, because I think I got it right. Oh, shoot. You know what? Depending on how I feel, I might talk about Zola next week, because release day is after I'm going to go see Zola. So I might talk about it next week, or I might take a moment and talk about the Pop documentary on Netflix, especially the T-Pain episode. I don't know. I'll see how I do. It's either that or Zola, but I'm definitely going to talk about Zola. So if I don't talk about Zola next week, I'm definitely going to talk about it the week after. Okay. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you're well. And if you're not well at the moment, I hope you're in a place to get well safely. I hope you are able to enjoy your weather, that it's not raining, it's gross, and that it's not gross, that you are able to find some joy today because you deserve it. Take care of yourself. Have a wonderful day, whatever time of day it is. And until next time.